I never imagined I'd walk in on something like that. It was just another day after school, and I thought I'd have the house to myself. But what I stumbled upon behind my stepmom Olivia's partially open door left me speechless. Caught in such an intimate, unexpected moment, my whole world shifted instantly. What happened next changed everything between us, something neither of us could ever take back. As I tell you how it all unfolded into a night I'll never forget, I want you to know that everything that happened was consensual. It might sound unbelievable, but it's the honest truth. I had just gotten home from school that day, feeling drained from hours of classes and socializing. The house was eerily quiet when I walked in, with only the soft hum of the refrigerator breaking the silence. Golden beams of late afternoon sunlight stretched across the hardwood floors, giving everything a peaceful, calm atmosphere. I was sure I was alone. I tossed my heavy backpack onto the couch, planning to grab a snack and unwind for a bit before anyone else got home. But as I headed toward the kitchen, something stopped me in my tracks. A sound, faint but unmistakable. I froze, unsure of what I was hearing. It was soft, almost like a low hum or whisper. But there was something different about it, something intimate and personal that made my skin tingle with uncertainty. I listened more closely, trying to figure out where it was coming from. Though it wasn't loud, there was something about it that drew me in. Slowly and cautiously, I crept down the hallway. My feet made no sound on the floor as I approached the source of the noise. When I reached Olivia's room, I noticed her door was slightly ajar, just enough that I could see the edge of the bed and a sliver of the room beyond. I knew I shouldn't look. Every fiber of my being told me to turn around and walk away. But something kept pulling me toward that door, an insatiable curiosity gnawing at me. Before I could stop myself, I was peeking through the crack. That's when I saw her. My stepmom Olivia was lying on the bed, her back arched slightly, eyes closed in what could only be described as pure pleasure. For a long moment, I was too stunned to move. I stood there frozen, my breath catching in my throat as I watched her, my mind racing to process what I was seeing. She was touching herself, her fingers moving slowly and rhythmically as soft moans escaped her lips. The sight sent a jolt through me, something deep and unfamiliar. I felt my pulse quicken, my heart pounding hard in my chest as a wave of heat washed over me. I knew I should leave, should back away quietly and pretend I'd never seen any of this. But I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, my eyes locked on her. Every little movement she made sent a ripple through me. Olivia was beautiful, so incredibly beautiful in that moment. Her body moved with an effortless, natural grace. Just as I was about to force myself to turn away, she opened her eyes. I panicked for a second, certain I'd been caught. But instead of reacting with shock or anger, she just looked at me. Her gaze was soft, almost inviting. There was no hint of surprise or embarrassment, just a slow, smoldering look that made my skin tingle and my breath catch in my throat. When she spoke, her voice was low and warm. She invited me in, and for a moment I thought I must have imagined it. But when I didn't move, she smiled, that same inviting smile, and repeated the invitation more firmly. My legs seemed to move on their own, slowly carrying me into the room. My heart pounded harder with every step. I felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement swirling inside me. When I finally stood by the bed looking down at her, I could feel the tension between us, thick and palpable in the air. Olivia didn't say anything at first. She just kept watching me with those deep, smoldering eyes that seemed to see right through me. I swallowed hard, trying to form words, but nothing came out. My mouth felt dry, and my thoughts were a jumbled mess. She didn't seem to mind my silence. She just reached out, taking my hand gently. Her touch was soft but firm as she pulled me closer. My heart was racing now, and I could feel a knot of nervousness tightening in my stomach. But there was something else too, a feeling that felt like excitement. Anticipation. As I sat down beside her on the edge of the bed, Olivia didn't let go of my hand. Instead, she guided it slowly down her body, over the soft curve of her hip. The warmth of her skin radiated through my fingertips. My breath caught as I felt her hand over mine, leading me with slow, deliberate movements. I could feel her pulse beneath her skin, the subtle rise and fall of her chest as she breathed. She whispered to me, her voice barely audible but filled with a tenderness that made my heart ache. She told me not to be afraid, to just relax. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I was more nervous or excited. Her fingers intertwined with mine, guiding me, teaching me. We moved together in perfect unison. Every touch sent a jolt of electricity through me, and I could feel the connection between us deepening with every passing second. It wasn't just physical, it was something more, something intimate and real. The moments stretched on, the world outside fading away until there was nothing left but the two of us. We were sharing something that felt so forbidden and yet so right. Time seemed to slow, each breath and touch lasting forever, as the tension between us built to a breaking point. Olivia pulled me closer, her body pressing against mine. I could feel the heat of her skin, the warmth of her breath on my neck. Her lips brushed lightly against my ear as she whispered again, her voice soft and breathy. She asked me to stay with her, her tone filled with a quiet urgency that made my heart skip. She didn't want me to go. I couldn't have left even if I'd wanted to. The pull between us was too strong, the connection too deep. We were locked in this moment, and nothing else mattered. I leaned in, my lips inches from hers, feeling the heat of her breath on my skin. Time seemed to stand still, the world holding its breath as we hovered on the edge of something neither of us could deny. The air between us was thick with anticipation, the kind of tension that sent a shiver down my spine. Then, just as I thought the moment would break, Olivia leaned in. Her lips brushed softly against mine, sending a shockwave of warmth through me. It was gentle at first, tentative, as if we were testing the waters. But then it deepened. Her lips pressed more firmly against mine, her hand still guiding me, still showing me what she wanted, what we both wanted. The kiss was slow and tender, filled with a kind of passion that was both overwhelming and gentle. It felt like everything we'd been holding back was pouring out in that moment. Every touch, every breath, every heartbeat synced together as we finally gave in to the tension that had been building between us. We stayed like that for what felt like an eternity, wrapped up in each other, the world outside forgotten. I could feel Olivia's body trembling slightly against mine, the soft sound of her breathing filling the air between us. Finally, she pulled back slightly, her forehead resting against mine, her eyes half closed as she caught her breath. I could see the faintest hint of a smile on her lips, a kind of satisfaction that made my heart swell. She whispered, asking if I was okay. Her voice was barely audible, but filled with a tenderness that made me feel safe and cared for. I nodded, unable to form words. She smiled again, her fingers brushing lightly through my hair as she leaned in once more, her lips brushing softly against my cheek before pulling back completely. The room was filled with a warm, quiet calm. The tension that had once been there was now replaced by a soft, glowing contentment. Neither of us spoke for a long time. We just sat there together, our breaths slowly returning to normal, the heat between us gradually cooling to something softer, more intimate. Olivia leaned her head on my shoulder, and I wrapped my arm around her, pulling her closer. We sat in the fading light of the afternoon, the quiet sounds of the house surrounding us. Whatever this was between us, it was new, fragile, and completely unexpected. But in that moment, none of it mattered. All that mattered was that we were here, together, sharing something that felt impossibly special, something that went beyond anything either of us could have imagined. And for now, that was enough. As we sat there, the quiet intimacy between us seemed to grow with each passing moment. The sunlight filtering through the window was beginning to fade, casting a soft amber glow over the room. But inside, everything felt charged and alive. The weight of what had just happened hung in the air, and even though neither of us spoke, it was as though we were both waiting, suspended in this tension that had yet to fully unravel. I could feel Olivia's body relax slightly against mine. But the way she nestled closer, her hand gently resting on my thigh, made it clear that whatever had started between us wasn't over yet. My heart was still pounding in my chest, a strange mix of excitement and nervousness coursing through me. Every part of me was hyper-aware of her presence, her soft breaths, the warmth of her skin against mine, the subtle scent of her perfume still lingering in the air. She tilted her head slightly, her lips brushing against the side of my neck, sending shivers down my spine. The touch was light, barely there, but it ignited something inside me, a spark that flared into a slow burning desire. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the sensation wash over me before turning my head to look at her. Her eyes met mine, and there was something different in her gaze now, something darker, more intense. The softness from before was still there, but beneath it, I could see a hunger that matched my own. Olivia didn't say a word, but the way her fingers lightly traced circles on my leg told me everything I needed to know. I leaned in, capturing her lips again, but this time there was no hesitation, no tentative testing of boundaries. The kiss was deeper, more urgent, as if the need we had both been holding back had finally broken free. Her hands slid up my chest, her fingers curling into the fabric of my shirt as she pulled me closer. I could feel her body responding to mine, the subtle press of her curves against me making my head spin. Everything about this moment felt forbidden, but that only seemed to make it more intoxicating. The fact that she was my stepmom, someone who had always been just out of reach, made the connection between us feel even more dangerous. I couldn't stop myself from wanting more, from needing to be closer to her. Olivia's hands moved to the back of my neck, pulling me down with her as she shifted on the bed. Her body lay back against the pillows as she guided me with her. I followed, the pull between us too strong to resist. Soon I was hovering over her, my arms bracing me as I looked down at her, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her eyes locked on mine. In that moment, the intensity between us was palpable. She reached up, her fingers gently tracing the line of my jaw before tugging me down again. Our lips met in another heated kiss. This time, her hands roamed freely, exploring my back and shoulders, pulling me even closer until there was no space left between us. The heat from Olivia's body was overwhelming. I could feel her heart racing just as fast as mine, the rhythm of it beating against my chest. I moved my hand down her side, feeling the soft curve of her waist beneath my fingers. When I reached the hem of her shirt, I hesitated for just a second, unsure if I was crossing a line. But she didn't pull away. If anything, she arched her back slightly, encouraging the touch. Her body was responding to mine in a way that left no doubt about what she wanted. My fingers slipped beneath the fabric, and as I slid my hand up along the smooth warmth of her skin, I heard her soft gasp, a sound that sent a fresh wave of heat coursing through me. Olivia's hands tangled in my hair, pulling me closer as she deepened the kiss. Her lips parted slightly, letting me in. The taste of her was intoxicating, and I could feel the tension in her body, the way she moved beneath me, her every touch filled with a kind of urgency that made it impossible to think of anything else but her. We were completely lost in each other now, every barrier between us crumbling as we gave in to the desire that had been simmering beneath the surface for so long. There was no going back. The weight of that realization hung in the air, but neither of us seemed to care. All that mattered was this moment, this connection, this undeniable pull that had drawn us together. Olivia's hands were everywhere, tracing the lines of my shoulders, my arms, my chest, as if she couldn't get enough. And I felt the same way. The more I touched her, the more I wanted her, and the intensity of it all was almost overwhelming. It was as if we had been holding back for so long, and now that the floodgates were open, there was no stopping the tide that swept us both away. She moaned softly against my lips, her fingers tightening in my hair as she pressed her body against mine. The sound of it sent a fresh surge of desire through me. I couldn't get enough of her, her taste, her scent, the feel of her beneath me. Every part of me was on fire, and I knew that there was no going back now. Not after this. I pulled back for just a moment, my eyes searching hers, as if I needed to make sure she was still with me in this, still wanting it as much as I did. But the look in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. There was no hesitation there, no second thoughts. Only that same smoldering hunger that had been there from the beginning, urging us forward. Without a word, Olivia reached for me again. Her fingers curled into the front of my shirt, pulling me down to her with a soft, almost pleading urgency. And as our lips met once more, I felt myself completely surrender to the moment. I let go of every doubt, every fear, and gave in to the desire that had been building between us since the moment I walked into that room. The tension between us was electric. Every touch, every kiss pushed us closer to the edge. Her body moved beneath mine, her hands roaming over my skin as if she couldn't get enough. The sound of her breathless gasps filled the room, driving me wild with need. We were tangled in each other now, completely consumed by the passion that had taken hold of us. There was no turning back. I felt her fingers trail down my chest, her touch sending shivers through me as she pulled me closer still. Her body arched beneath mine, as if begging for more. And I gave it to her, every touch, every kiss, every whispered word, drawing us deeper into the moment. There was nothing left but the two of us, lost in a world of our own making. The intensity of it all was almost too much to bear. The tension between us built to a fever pitch as we teetered on the edge of something deeper, something more. But we weren't ready to let go just yet. We lingered there, hovering on the brink, savoring every touch, every kiss, as the heat between us grew and grew, until it felt like we might both explode from the sheer intensity of it. I could feel Olivia trembling beneath me, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps as she clung to me. Her body pressed against mine in a way that made my head spin. And I knew that she felt it too, that same unbearable tension, that same desperate need for release. But we weren't there yet. Not quite. We hovered on the edge, drawing out the moment, letting the anticipation build until it was almost too much to bear. The room was filled with the sounds of our breathless moans, our whispered names, the quiet urgency of our movements as we gave in to the passion that had been simmering between us for so long. It was perfect, this moment, this connection between us. And as I held her close, our bodies moving together in perfect harmony, I knew that nothing would ever be the same after this. We had crossed a line, stepped into something forbidden, something dangerous. But I didn't care anymore. Because in that moment, as we hovered on the edge of something more, all that mattered was Olivia. Her touch, her kiss, the feel of her beneath me, as we lost ourselves in each other completely. And as we finally let go, surrendering to the intensity of it all, I knew that this was only the beginning. Whatever came next, whatever consequences we might face, I was ready to face them with her. Because in that moment, as we clung to each other in the fading light of day, I knew that everything had changed, and I wouldn't have it any other way. As the intensity of our passion began to subside, Olivia and I lay tangled together, our breathing gradually returning to normal. The room was quiet now, save for the soft rustle of sheets as we shifted closer to each other. Outside, the last rays of sunlight had faded, leaving us in the dim glow of twilight. I looked at her, really looked at her, taking in every detail. The flush of her cheeks, the soft shine in her eyes, the way her hair fell across the pillow. Part of me still couldn't believe what had just happened, but the warmth of her body against mine was undeniable proof. "What now?" I whispered, almost afraid to break the silence that had settled over us. Olivia traced her fingers along my jawline, a small smile playing at her lips. "Now," she said softly, "we figure it out together. We knew this wouldn't be easy. There were so many complications, so many potential consequences." But as we lay there, wrapped in each other's arms, those concerns felt distant and unimportant. We talked for hours that night, our voices low and intimate in the darkness. We shared our fears, our hopes, our desires. It was strange how something that should have felt so wrong instead felt like the most natural thing in the world. Over the next few weeks, we settled into a new routine. We were careful, of course, when others were around. We maintained our normal stepmother-stepson relationship. But in private moments, stolen glances and subtle touches hinted at our secret. It wasn't always smooth sailing. There were moments of guilt, of fear, of wondering if we were making a huge mistake. The first time we heard my dad's key in the lock after we'd been together, we both nearly jumped out of our skins. But we learned to be discreet, to cherish our private moments without letting them spill over into our public lives. One night, about a month after that first afternoon, Olivia and I were sitting on the couch watching a movie. My dad was working late, as he often did. As the credits rolled, Olivia turned to me, her expression serious. "We need to talk about the future," she said, her voice quiet but firm. My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" She took my hand in hers, her thumb tracing circles on my palm. "This thing between us, it's not just physical, is it? At least not for me." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "No," I said. "It's not just physical for me either. I think I'm falling in love with you, Olivia." The smile that lit up her face was breathtaking. She leaned in, kissing me softly. "I think I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered against my lips. But with that admission came a new set of challenges. We both knew that our relationship, if discovered, would cause pain and confusion for those around us. The guilt of keeping this secret from my dad weighed heavily on both of us. As time passed, our connection only grew stronger. We learned to communicate without words, to understand each other's needs and desires on a level I'd never experienced before. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. There were close calls, like the time my best friend dropped by unexpectedly and nearly walked in on us in a compromising position, or the night my dad came home early and we had to scramble to make it look like we were just having a casual conversation. Each close call made us more careful, but it also made us question whether we could keep this up long term. The stress of constantly looking over our shoulders was taking its toll. One particularly close call led to our first real fight. Tensions were high, and we both said things we didn't mean. I stormed out, spending the night driving aimlessly around town, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and hurt. But as the sun rose, I found myself back at our doorstep. Olivia opened the door before I could even knock, her eyes red-rimmed from a sleepless night. Without a word, we fell into each other's arms, both of us apologizing through our tears. That fight, as painful as it was, made us stronger. We realized that what we had was worth fighting for, worth protecting. We started to talk more seriously about our future, about what it might look like if we decided to make this relationship permanent. We knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be shock, disappointment, maybe even anger from those closest to us. But as we sat together, planning and dreaming, I felt a sense of hope I'd never experienced before. Months passed, and our bond only grew deeper. We became experts at living our double life, responsible stepson and caring stepmom in public, passionate lovers in private. But we both knew this couldn't last forever. As our one-year anniversary approached, 1 year since that fateful afternoon when I walked in on Olivia, we made a decision. It was time to stop hiding, time to face the consequences of our choices. We spent weeks planning how to break the news, agonizing over every detail. And on a quiet Sunday afternoon, with trembling hands and racing hearts, we sat down with my dad to tell him the truth. The conversation that followed was one of the hardest of my life. There were tears, shouts, moments of stunned silence. But as I held Olivia's hand tightly in mine, I knew we were doing the right thing. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. We had bridges to rebuild, trust to regain. But as we faced the future together, I couldn't help but think back to that afternoon a year ago. In a single moment, everything had changed. And despite all the challenges, all the pain, I wouldn't change a thing. Because that moment had led me here, to this love that defied all expectations. And as I looked at Olivia, seeing the same love reflected in her eyes, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together.
Thanks for joining me on this wild ride. If you loved this story, make sure to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe for more shocking tales of family drama and Reddit gold. Want to hear another crazy story? Click the video right here. Until next time, stay curious.